My name is Lucy, and I've prepared this video on Thomas Laqueur's 1 and 2 sex models and the gendering of nature for the class GWST 3426, Sex and the State, at Dalhousie University in Halifax. In the 1980s, Michel Foucault posited an invention of true sex in the 1800s as the division between two periods of Western thinking about biological sex. The time before this division is portrayed as being unoccupied by the biological differences between male and female, and the time after this invention of true sex is shown to be obsessed with our inherent differences. This division of time is the basis for Thomas Laqueur's discussion of the 1 and 2 sex models in his book, Making Sex. Before I go into an analysis of the effects of society on sex, I just want to go over what we know today about the anatomy and genetics of sex. So here's a model of a vagina, uterus, and ovaries showing the path that the eggs take from the ovaries through the fallopian tubes to the uterus. And here's a model of a penis and testes. So sperm is made and stored in the testes. These structures in no way dictate the assignment of an individual as male or female, something that we know much more about today than did Laqueur at the time of writing, and certainly more than did those anatomists in the early modern period. Genetics are a larger contributing factor to biological sex, but there's still no binary to be found there. Typically, XY chromosomes denote male and XX denote female, but that's often not the case. There are a number of conditions that result in a different sex chromosome makeup or in the uptake or production of more or less sex hormones. We know today that the presence of a vagina or uterus is not mutually exclusive of the presence of a penis or testes, and that none of these structures have a bearing on a person's sex or gender identity. But it was the scientists that Laqueur talked about that helped to enshrine those binary sex beliefs in the canon of Western anatomical knowledge in the first place. The one-sex model refers to the time before the invention of true sex when people believed that there was only one sex and that sex was male. This idea came from Galenic and Aristotelian writings that showed that female sex organs were just the same as the male sex organs, except they were inside the body. Names like ovaries, vagina, and testes didn't exist yet. Everything was labeled as the masculine or feminine version of typically male structures like the testes. Female and male were therefore not defined as being two different things, but just varying degrees of the same sex, with women being the lesser form of man. The two-sex model is what came after the European Enlightenment, or the so-called Age of Reason, that took place from the late 17th to the early 19th century. So if the Enlightenment was the Age of Reason, the two-sex model surely must have precipitated because of some groundbreaking anatomical discovery, right? Wrong. As Laqueur says, the notion that scientific advancement alone, pure anatomical discovery, could account for the extraordinary late 18th and 19th century interest in sexual dimorphism is not simply empirically wrong, it's philosophically misguided. As well as two incommensurable sexes were and are as much the product of culture as was and is the one-sex model. The Enlightenment saw a transition from metaphysics, which is the high valuation of abstract theories, to physics and the need for empirical reasoning. With the shift away from religion, the Enlightenment saw the birth of political discussion and new opportunities for power structures within communities and society. Men had always been held as superior, but with these new power structures and male need for empirical evidence, conclusions had to be drawn on the differences between men and women. With this newfound empirical biological reasoning for feminine inferiority, the subjugation of women in society was easier than ever before. An argument surrounding a woman's ability or inability to fulfill a role could be settled anatomically. The differentiation between male and female anatomy meant that the new division in society was based on sex, not gender. As this was the new age of scientific reasoning, there were some valuable findings made on reproductive anatomy in the period, but ironically, most of them revealed more and more homologies between male and female structures that would have fit well into the one-sex and not into the two-sex model. For instance, it was discovered that until the 8th week of pregnancy, the Mullerian and Wolffian ducts, which are the precursor to the female and male reproductive tracts, coexist within a fetus. This means that the penis and the clitoris, the ovary and the testes have the same embryonic origins. These discoveries would seemingly go to reaffirm the one-sex model, right? Well, not if you're using your research to reaffirm your societal sex roles. There was panic amongst the old boys' club that is science in the 17th century when it was thought that the female egg provided the entire essence of a fetus and male ejaculate was merely accessory. Then Anton van Leeuwenhoek made the noble discovery with his microscope that male ejaculate contained millions of tiny animals, or sperm as we now know it, and the male role in reproduction was reaffirmed and men were powerful again. The egg could then be seen as a passive nest where sperm would go to develop into the full form of a child. Some scientists had believed up until this point that it was necessary for a woman to have an orgasm in order for fertilization to take place. This idea was used to deny guilty verdicts in cases of rape that resulted in pregnancy. This idea was also used to deny the existence of female sexual pleasure and make any discussion of such topic taboo in the following centuries. As I'm sure you know, this idea of a need for orgasm in order for fertilization to take place has been proven categorically untrue time and again, but we might want to let some of these guys know that. Now that sexual reproduction in humans was demonstrated to be another arena of male success and domination, scientists went to work to attach characteristics of sexual reproduction to all corners of the natural world. The natural world in the 18th century was a great fascination of the leading class of Europeans. This went hand in hand with the discovery and conquest of the so-called New World. Finding and procuring samples of animal skeletons or oddities and studying the natural world was another arena where masculine sexual dominance could be asserted. New discoveries about nature were described as scientists penetrating the secrets of nature, with nature always portrayed as a feminine object. Carl Linnaeus, paternalistically labeled the father of botany, spoke of plants as sexual beings, even going so far as to label plant reproduction in some cases as heterosexual marriage. Other botanists described male plant stamens as having orgasms, while the more modest female pistils expressed little sexual excitement, perpetuating ideas on human female pleasure into the plant world. Only one depiction of a female skeleton existed by the 19th century, so Samuel Thomas von Sommering took it upon himself to produce a painting of a young woman's skeleton. In order to have his painting of a skeleton be believable as the basis of a living woman, he got the 5 most beautiful women he knew to act as models for his painting of a skeleton. Here again we see supposedly definitive anatomy tied to cultural standards. After all of this work, though, his skeleton was deemed unacceptable for not displaying well enough the pelvis of the skeleton, where the key differences were seen to be for male and female. Taking matters into his own hands, the anatomist John Barclay decided to draw skeletons with an emphasis on the pelvis. The male skeleton was depicted in front of that of a horse, known for their strength and virality, while the female skeleton was depicted in front of an ostrich, which are apparently known for their prominent pelvises. That's quite honestly the most shocking thing I've discovered in the course of this project. In case you thought that this was something that quietly ended in the decades after the Enlightenment, let's just take a look in at the current state of affairs of anatomy and physiology, education, research, and practice. So first of all, this headline is a bit of a fun look at the patriarchy and science in action. I just want to say that there was no mention of the illustrations being straight or gay in the study, so they've declared these illustrations as being heterosexual. Maybe they meant that they were cisgendered, unclear, but I just thought it's really fun that this plays into my topic on 2 different levels. So anyway, textbooks still predominantly choose to show male models when illustrating general gross anatomy, only switching to female models when selectively displaying the mammary glands or the reproductive tract. Where female bodies are used in the place of male models for systems other than the reproductive tract, female models usually depict bodily functions with sociocultural feminine associations, such as the digestive system to represent nutrition, or the use of male bodies to show the nervous system and hand muscles, with reasoning and manipulation being typically male-ascribed traits. Not to mention that depictions of female bodies in anatomy textbooks have been known to show change over time to match with current societal beauty standards. This is like that time that the guy compared a woman's body to that of an ostrich, but also it's the 21st century. This preference for male bodies in biological and even professional medical education has led to a lack of knowledge within the general public and even amongst doctors on numerous women's health issues, including the symptoms of a heart attack for women are vastly different from those of men, and this inability to note the onset of a heart attack leads to 50% more deaths for women admitted to the hospital with symptoms of a heart attack than men, while 2/3 of all funding for heart research goes to men's heart attacks. Most of the mice and rats used in biomedical studies are male. What does this mean? We have less research on how drugs affect women when studies transfer from animal to human trials, and we don't know what harm may be caused to the women in these trials. This has led to more drugs being pulled from shelves due to adverse reactions or even death in women because there was not enough adequate pre-market testing conducted. As of 2009, more than 40% of women who received a diagnosis of an autoimmune disorder like lupus or arthritis had previously been told by their doctor that they were being hypochondriacs or too concerned with their health. In this video, I've discussed Lacour's one-sex and two-sex models and given specific examples of the influence that gender stereotypes had on the first scientific research on sex organs and the roles played by sperm and egg, and how this gendered research bias spilled over into the botanical and zoological worlds. I've also shown that current textbooks and research are still influenced by male privilege, which goes towards enabling the erasure of women's health. Ultimately, I hope you can see how current societal gender norms have been informed by sex characteristics that were themselves informed by gender stereotypes when they were originally elucidated. Thank you.